Nobody believes me when I tell them what happened at Skinwalker Ranch. They think I'm chasing YouTube views or angling for a book deal. The university disavowed our research. My colleagues either won't speak to me or are dead, but I need to document what happened before they find me too. My name is Dr. Marcus Chen. 6 months ago, I was a tenured professor of parapsychology at Northwestern. Today, I'm typing this from my fifth motel room this week, paying cash using public Wi-Fi, and looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. It started with an email from Dr. Elaine Hoffman, a former student of mine who'd gone to work for a private research foundation. The Kessler Institute had apparently acquired Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, 2,000 acres of the most paranormally active land in America, and was assembling a research team for a 2-week expedition. The budget was substantial, the equipment cutting edge, and the opportunity unprecedented,
We're not just documenting phenomena anymore.
Elaine wrote.
We're attempting contact.
I should have deleted that email. 7 of us arrived at the ranch in early March. Myself, Elaine, Dr. James Porter, a physicist specializing in quantum field theory, Denise Mitchell, our equipment specialist, Carlos Vasquez, a cultural anthropologist with knowledge of indigenous beliefs, Trevor Wilson, our security consultant, and Sarah Kim, a gifted medium who'd participated in previous studies at my lab. The property was beautiful in a desolate way. Rolling hills, homestead-style buildings, in a pervasive silence that felt expectant rather than peaceful. We set up our base in the main house, establishing a control room filled with monitors, sensors, and recording equipment. The first 3 days were uneventful. We documented the usual oddities associated with the place: battery drains, equipment malfunctions, mysterious lights in the sky, but nothing beyond what previous researchers had encountered. Elaine grew increasingly agitated.
We didn't come all this way to document more of the same.
She said during our evening meeting.
The Institute wants results.
That's when she revealed what had been shipped separately from our other equipment, a device resembling a satellite dish connected to a series of amplifiers and a quantum computer. She called it a consciousness amplifier.
We've been developing this based on research from the Monroe Institute and classified DARPA projects.
She explained.
It magnifies human consciousness like a radio transmitter, broadcasting our thoughts and awareness across dimensional barriers.
Carlos immediately objected.
You can't just blast a signal into the unknown and expect nothing bad to happen. The indigenous peoples who lived here considered this place powerful but dangerous.
He continued.
The Ute specifically warned against speaking the name of skinwalkers aloud because it draws their attention. And you want to broadcast our consciousness like a beacon?
Elaine dismissed his concerns.
That's precisely why we brought Sarah. She'll be our receiver, tuned to pick up whatever responds.
I should have sided with Carlos, but the scientist in me was intrigued. We'd been studying paranormal phenomena for decades with little progress. Maybe a more active approach was warranted. The next night, we set up the amplifier in the center of what Elaine called a hotspot, an area where previous researchers had documented intense activity. We positioned Sarah in a comfortable chair within a circle of sensors, monitoring her brainwaves, heart rate, and skin conductivity. The amplifier emitted a low hum as it powered up. The air seemed to thicken, making it difficult to breathe. Our equipment began registering anomalies: temperature drops, electromagnetic spikes, radiation fluctuations. Sarah's eyes rolled back, showing only whites. Her brain activity skyrocketed.
Something's coming through.
Elaine whispered excitedly. That's when Sarah began to speak, not in her voice, but in something ancient and guttural. The words weren't in any language I recognized, but they made my skin crawl. Blood trickled from her nose and ears.
Shut it down,
I ordered, but Trevor was already moving, pulling the power cables. The amplifier didn't stop. If anything, the hum grew louder, vibrating through my bones. The sky above us turned a deep, unnatural purple, swirling like a vortex. Our equipment exploded in cascading sparks. Sarah convulsed, her back arching impossibly. And then, silence. The amplifier died. Sarah collapsed. The sky returned to normal, though no stars were visible. We rushed Sarah back to the house. Her vital signs were stable, but she remained unconscious. The rest of us argued about what to do next.
We need to evacuate.
Carlos insisted.
Whatever came through that connection is here now.
That's exactly why we can't leave.
Elaine countered.
We've achieved contact. This is what we came for.
The argument became moot when we discovered the vehicles wouldn't start. No electronics worked. Not our phones, satellite radio, nothing. We were stranded. Sarah woke the next morning with no memory of what had happened, but she wasn't the same. She moved differently, spoke differently, subtle changes that became more pronounced as the day progressed. She kept staring at Trevor with an unsettling intensity. That night, the phenomena began. It started with sounds, scratching in the walls, whispers in empty rooms, footsteps on the roof. Then objects moved when no one was looking. Doors that were locked would be found open. We'd glimpse shadows with impossible geometries. On the third night after the experiment, Trevor disappeared. We found his flashlight at the edge of the property, still on, pointing toward the darkness. The beam revealed nothing but empty desert. We organized a search party at dawn. James and Denise took the north section of the property. Carlos and I headed east. Elaine insisted on staying with Sarah, who had developed a high fever and was muttering in that same ancient language. Carlos and I found nothing but animal tracks that stopped abruptly, as if the creatures had vanished mid-stride. When we returned to the house, James and Denise hadn't come back. Elaine was alone, shaking in the control room.
Sarah's gone.
She whispered.
I just turned my back for a second. She couldn't even walk on her own this morning.
That night, the three of us barricaded ourselves in the main room, backs to each other, watching the darkness close in. Around midnight, we heard Trevor's voice outside, calling for help. Carlos wanted to investigate, but I held him back.
That's not Trevor,
I said.
How can you be sure?
Carlos asked. The voice shifted then, becoming James, then Denise, then Sarah, cycling through them like trying on clothes, before settling into something that was all of them at once, a chorus of familiar voices speaking in perfect unison.
We want to come in.
The voices said.
We're so cold out here.
By morning, Elaine was missing. She'd gone to use the bathroom and never returned. The window was open, the screen torn as if something had pulled her through. Carlos completely broke down.
It knows us now.
He kept saying.
It's wearing their faces, using their voices. It's learning.
Somehow, miraculously, one of the Jeeps started that afternoon. We didn't question it, just threw our essential belongings inside and raced down the dirt road leading off the property. We were halfway to the highway when Carlos screamed. I looked over to see him clawing at his eyes.
They're in the car.
He shrieked.
They're right behind you.
There was nothing in the back seat, but Carlos was convulsing, fighting against invisible assailants. The Jeep swerved as he grabbed the wheel. I fought for control, but we went off the road, rolling several times before coming to rest against a boulder. I woke up in a hospital in Vernal, Utah. Carlos was dead. His autopsy revealed no cause beyond massive organ failure. I spent 3 weeks recovering from a broken collarbone and concussion. The ranch owner claimed we were never authorized to be there, and the Kessler Institute denied any connection to our expedition. I thought it was over. I was wrong. It followed us back. Or maybe it was inside us all along. The first sign was the dreams. It's where I was floating above my body, watching myself sleep. In these dreams, my mouth would move, speaking those same ancient words Sarah had channeled. I'd wake up with my sheets soaked in sweat, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. Then came the distortions in reflective surfaces. My reflection would move a fraction of a second too late, or its eyes would track something I couldn't see. Sometimes, late at night, my reflection would smile when I wasn't smiling. I started seeing the others too. Trevor walking through a crowd before vanishing when I called his name. Denise staring at me from a passing bus. Sarah standing at the foot of my bed in the darkest hours of night, her eyes black pools. Always watching, always just at the edge of my vision. 3 weeks ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a thumb drive containing footage from our equipment at Skinwalker Ranch. Footage I hadn't known existed. Most of it was corrupted, but one file played clearly, the amplifier experiment. In it, I saw what happened to Sarah that night, what actually emerged from her. I won't describe it, I can't, but it wasn't Sarah who woke up the next morning. It wasn't Sarah who stayed behind with Elaine. It was never Sarah again. The file ended with a message typed across the screen.
We are coming for the rest of you.
2 days later, I read about Elaine's suicide, found hanging in her apartment, though the medical examiner noted her neck wasn't broken. Death by asphyxiation while conscious, with defensive wounds on her hands. I've been running ever since, changing motels every night, avoiding cameras, sleeping in shifts. Sometimes I think I'm just having a psychotic break. That would be easier to accept than the truth. That we opened a door at Skinwalker Ranch and something ancient and patient came through. Something that's still learning how to exist in our world, wearing our colleagues like ill-fitting suits, learning our weaknesses. I'm leaving this account because I think tonight is my last night. The lights in my motel room keep flickering, forming patterns I'm starting to understand. The mirror shows more people behind me each time I look. Trevor, Denise, Elaine, Carlos, Sarah, all watching with those same black eyes. Their mouths move in unison, counting down. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. And if you ever receive an invitation to Skinwalker Ranch, burn it. Some doors aren't meant to be open. And if you see any of us smiling, beckoning, claiming to be survivors, run. Because it's not us anymore. It hasn't been for a long time.
End of transcript. Note: the above document was recovered from a public file sharing service 3 days after the disappearance of Dr. Marcus Chen from a motel in Flagstaff, Arizona. His current whereabouts remain unknown. The Kessler Institute continues to deny any knowledge of the described expedition, and property records show no change in ownership of the Skinwalker Ranch during the specified time frame. Attempts to locate the other individuals mentioned have been unsuccessful.